31 years ago this month, on September the 22nd, 1989, our state was devastated by a hurricane. Hurricane Hugo was a strong Category 5 hurricane as it barreled through the Leeward Islands and raked the island of Puerto Rico with high winds and heavy rains during the first and second weeks of September 1989. At this point, Hugo had winds as high as 160 miles an hour. It was one of the most powerful hurricanes ever to move through the northeastern Caribbean in many, many years. After moving over Puerto Rico, which has quite a rugged terrain, Hugo weakened quite considerably, and it seemed to have problems recovering its strength upon re-entering the warmer waters of the western Atlantic. With its winds only hovering at 105 miles an hour, it was only a strong Category 2 hurricane. Hugo wasn't given much thought, but what was to happen next, however, changed our history here in South Carolina. Between Hugo, in its weakened state, and its ultimate destination of South Carolina was the very warm ocean current known as the Gulf Stream, which runs from the Florida Straits all the way up to the Canadian Rockies. Once Hugo entered the Gulf Stream, it exploded as its winds increased from 105 miles an hour to nearly 140 miles an hour in slightly over 12 hours. Emergency management personnel up and down the coast scrambled to prepare for this very powerful Category 4 hurricane. Hugo eventually came ashore on the night of September the 21st, 1989, 31 years ago, in Charleston, in the coastal community of McClellanville, with a storm surge of over 18 feet and winds near 140 miles an hour. Hugo was born, as most hurricanes are, coming off the coast of Africa as a depression. As it moved across, it developed into a storm, and it became a very powerful storm, Category 5, as it approached Puerto Rico. As it crossed Puerto Rico, it lost much of its power and was downgraded to a Category 2 storm. It didn't worry too many people at that time. However, in the warm Atlantic Gulf Stream, it picked up huge amount of power and steam. In only 12 hours, it increased to 140 miles an hour wind and became a powerful Category 4 once again as it continued its march towards South Carolina. At midnight on September the 21st, with 135 mile an hour winds, Hugo came ashore in South Carolina at McClellanville and began its march across our entire state. No one had ever seen so much damage as far inland as this hurricane had traveled. Between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m., Hurricane Hugo hit Sumter, South Carolina, with winds between 80 and 100 miles an hour, winds never before seen in our fair city. Hugo continued through South Carolina all the way through Rock Hill, well over 200 miles inland, still with winds at 70 miles an hour. Its devastation in our community was massive. When Hugo hit, the right front quadrant is what hit Sumter, South Carolina, approximately right here. The eye of the storm passed directly over the city. That is the most powerful part of the storm. And with 100 mile an hour winds, the damage across the city was immense. Bridges in Charleston and McClellanville were ripped from their moorings. Boats were slammed against the shore and piled high. Some were even carried into the middle of roads in the middle of Charleston, South Carolina. Houses were ripped and destroyed and torn apart. Coastal communities were devastated. But right here in our own fair city of Sumter, Broad Street was also devastated. You can see the top of the clock tower in Sumter here, and this was the Sumter Airport at the time, where roofs were ripped from aircraft shelters and airplanes were tossed around like toothpicks. Every power pole in Sumter County was snapped in half. There was no electricity, and there would be none for at least 3 weeks. People used oil lamps, flashlights, candles, and emergency radios to keep in touch. The National Guard guarded many of the stores to prevent against looting. There was no gas available anywhere in Sumter because it took electricity to pump gas, and at the time, no generators were available. So gas was a very valuable commodity. Trees were snapped like toothpicks in half. Almost no treetops remained anywhere in Sumter County. Here in Dalzell and Shaw Air Force Base, we didn't escape the damage. Trees were broken and snapped like toothpicks in the wind. Many were landed on houses. Shaw Air Force Base was hit very hard. At the time, I was a young master sergeant at Shaw Air Force Base and lived on the base. The chapel barely escaped massive damage, although it was damaged with a few trees down on its roof. Base housing had trees down everywhere. The house I lived in on Elder Street, on Elder Drive, had a tree down on its roof. Power poles were snapped. Live power lines danced in the street with sparks flying everywhere. It took weeks just to clear the road and cut the trees up. This is where Kids First Academy is now today. This is the same building. This is what it looked like after Hurricane Hugo came through. This is a convenience store on Highway 15 South that was absolutely ripped to shreds as the storm passed through. Sumter's First Baptist Church, an iconic church in downtown Sumter, had its steeple ripped from the top and thrown into the road. The building was absolutely destroyed and devastated. It has been rebuilt since then. While Sumter County was devastated by Hurricane Hugo, and many people were hurt, only one storm-related death was recorded. It took many, many years for Sumter to recover from the destruction, but the city and the county did come together, and within a few weeks, power and water were restored, and life once again continued. Hugo serves as a reminder of the massive power of Mother Nature and how fragile we are in the path of such a powerful storm. Let's hope that we never see another Hugo hit our fair city, but make sure that we are always prepared should we once again need to face the wrath of Mother Nature.